The stories presented in this video are real, but we have changed the characters' names and altered images to protect their identities. The creator of this video is not an investigative officer. These narratives have been sourced from various internet platforms. Our intent is not to accuse or target anyone in particular. Thank you for understanding.
More than 200,000 homicide cases remain unresolved in the United States alone. The feelings that the families of the victims must be experiencing are extremely hard to imagine. Trying to hold on to hope while waiting for the other shoe to drop is a strange blend of emotions. Welcome to True Crime Stories Hub, where we dive deep into the most shocking and unsettling cases. In today's true crime documentary, we explore a heartbreaking story of betrayal and deceit, one that delves into stories about cheating in relationships and the devastating consequences they can have. Join us as we uncover the twists and turns of a case that kept everyone guessing for nearly a decade. The family of 21-year-old Bethany Decker felt just that. Bethany was young, pregnant, and going through a bit of a crisis when she abruptly and unexpectedly disappeared. Despite everyone's concerns, there were no hints, and the bereaved family would go years without finding any closure. However, everything changed when the smoking gun in this cold case turned out to be a crime that happened about 150 miles outside of Virginia. The tragic case of Bethany Decker, which is a real-life illustration of danger constantly being nearby, sometimes too close, shook the Virginia community with its strangeness. On May 13, 1989, Bethany Ann Littlejohn was born in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Kim Nelson, Bethany's mother, described her as a girl who was always smiling and lovely. Bethany was the mother hen and the head of the three, and she had two younger siblings as well. She was the reassuring, self-assured, and supportive big sister who always looked out for her younger siblings. Bethany studied in global and economic change at George Mason University in Fairfax after graduating from high school with honors. Bethany's roommates said she was extremely smart and highly brilliant. She was the kind of person who, the night before a deadline, could write an essay that was captivating and of A+ quality. To be honest, I wish I had the speed to produce these true crime documentaries. While balancing her education with a full-time job, Bethany demonstrated her multitasking skills and sense of responsibility. Nevertheless, she excelled in both her work and her studies. Friends claim that Bethany met Emil Decker, a male, as soon as she enrolled at George Mason University. Both Bethany and Emil, who served in the Army National Guard, clicked right away. Emil was completely smitten with Emily. Even the slightest details she stated in passing would stick in his mind, and he would attempt to fulfill them for her. Emil was also adored by Bethany's family, who thought that he was the best guy for Bethany. Bethany was truly pregnant with Emil's child shortly after they met, and their relationship was rapidly becoming serious. The couple was ecstatic, and Bethany had always dreamed of having a family with the man she loved, so this was essentially her dream come true. In 2009, Bethany and Emil were married in a flash, and 6 months later, they delivered a healthy baby son, Kai. Bethany continued to work to pay the bills and attend school at GMU throughout this time. However, Bethany and Emil's idyllic union was far from ideal. You see, Emil was in the Army and was rarely home since he would be abroad for months at a time. Emil was supposed to deploy with his unit to Afghanistan as soon as their son was born. This implied that Bethany will relocate into her in-laws' home in Columbia, Maryland, with her newborn. The couple's lives were gradually beginning to be affected by the stress of having a newborn and not having enough money to get by at the time. While Emil was deployed across continents, Bethany continued to balance her studies and even took a second part-time work at an Italian restaurant in Centerville, Virginia. Bethany even considered ending their relationship at one point, since she believed the young couple had jumped into things too soon and should just take some time to reflect. Although Emil was disturbed by these ideas, he wanted to give Bethany what she desired since he truly loved her, even if it meant ending their marriage permanently. Following Emil's deployment to Afghanistan, Bethany made the decision to move out on her own and into an apartment near her Ashburn, Virginia, workplace. The remainder of the case develops from here. However, this was around the time when Bethany met someone else, and things would soon alter forever for Bethany. Bethany met Ronald Roldan, age 31, while she was employed at the Italian restaurant. Ronald, who worked in the same restaurant as Bethany, was actually an immigrant from Bolivia. The two became friends very fast, and before you knew it, Bethany and Ronald were having a frenzied affair. Because she and Emil were still legally married even though they had split up. According to her pals, Bethany was in a strange phase of her life. She was lonely and isolated due to her separation from Emil, was young, and had a lot of responsibilities. She was struggling financially as well. This full-fledged affair with Ronald was thought to be the result of Bethany's desire to be daring for once. In Bethany's life at the moment, however, Ronald was the complete opposite. Ronald was a very emotional and erratic person, despite his charisma and his knowledge of how to win a lady over. Ronald was excessively controlling over Bethany, wanting to know her every move and plan, according to Bethany's acquaintances. For Bethany's friends, who clearly didn't think much of Ronald, seeing her with a man like this was oppressive. Unfortunately, Bethany was unaware of all of this and only desired a friend to help her deal with her loneliness. When Ronald moved in with Bethany and her child, their affair became much more serious, even though her friends were suspicious of him. However, Ronald's violent actions were another factor that escalated. You see, according to numerous sources, Ronald was an aggressive and jealous person. He even allegedly injured Bethany's kid, Kai. At one time, Kai got a black eye from being so terrified by Ronald. Furthermore, it is disgusting to consider that an adult man, who is also a father from a past relationship, could harm a helpless little child, and it demonstrates Ronald's character. Even though Bethany didn't realize how serious the situation was at first, her meeting with Ronald was a horrible idea from the outset, and she was now truly afraid of him. She even told her estranged husband Emil about the affair and acknowledged her error. He encouraged her to make amends with him before things worsened, even though he was reasonably furious. Even her mother Kim was there to assist Bethany in escaping this hectic and nasty scenario, since she realized she had to get Ronald or herself out of it. However, Bethany found herself at yet another turning point in her turbulent relationship with Ronald in the middle of January 2011. Since the pair was supposed to meet at the airport for their Hawaii vacation, Emil really got to know her first. She was now expecting Ronald's child. At that point, however, their relationship was barely functioning, and both Bethany and Emil were aware that something would eventually go wrong. However, Emil's response to his estranged wife's pregnancy and adultery was unexpected. Despite everything, he still wanted Bethany back and wasn't angry. Emil realized that his estranged wife's affair was but a minor inconvenience in the wide ocean of their existence after witnessing the harsh reality of war and growing thankful for their survival. Emil and Bethany did take a vacation to Hawaii, and they had a terrific time. They re-established contact, conversed, shared laughter, and rebuilt their friendship. For Bethany and Emil, the future appeared bright. However, this joy could not endure forever. When Bethany and Emil got back from vacation on January 28, 2011, Bethany was going to see her grandmother. They enjoyed their time together and talked about a variety of topics during the remainder of the afternoon, including Bethany's previous trip. Bethany also told her grandmother how stressed out she was by everything in her life. Later that night, the three of them enjoyed supper together, with Emil even joining the two. However, this happy gathering was abruptly interrupted when Bethany got a call from Ronald. Although the purpose of the call is unknown, we do know that Bethany hurried out of the room as it ended and exclaimed, "You don't understand what will happen to me if I don't go home." Unfortunately, this was Bethany's final chat with her grandmother and Emil, who was scheduled to deploy again on February 2nd in a few days. However, before leaving her grandmother's house, Bethany did promise Emil that she would come and see him off at the airport. However, Bethany was nowhere to be found by February 2nd, and Emil was forced to depart without having the opportunity to bid his true love farewell. Emil did, however, phone the restaurant where Bethany worked before departing, and he was told that she was unable to report for duty. Emil apparently became disturbed by this and informed Bethany's family that something was amiss. Bethany disappeared for the next few days. Her relatives and friends attempted to contact her, but she was not returning their calls or texts. Kim, Bethany's mother, found this unsettling, but when she began receiving strange texts from someone posing as Bethany, her suspicions reached a fever pitch. Furthermore, the Facebook messages that Bethany sent were also seen by her friends. However, the tone of the texts seemed strange. They sounded nothing like her. Everyone could see that the sender wasn't Bethany, since the English was very stiff and broken, and the words were misspelled. Additionally, Emil received an email from Bethany, but he quickly realized it wasn't from her. Since Bethany's grandparents lived nearby, Kim encouraged them to stop by her apartment to see how she was doing in light of all these strange events. They sensed something odd as soon as they got to Bethany's flat. In addition to having a flat tire, Bethany's automobile was parked at a strange angle. When Bethany's grandparents knocked on the door, no one answered. After reconsidering, 911 was contacted right away, and Bethany Decker, age 21, was listed as missing. The cops initially believed Bethany to be a fugitive. Perhaps she chose to simply take a vacation from everything since the stress of it all became too much for her. It wasn't Bethany, though. She wouldn't simply vanish from the face of the planet and give up on her career and education. Furthermore, Bethany would never simply up and leave and abandon her son. She couldn't have made the hasty decision to drop everything and simply take a break because she was also pregnant at the time. 3 long weeks had gone by, shockingly. Bethany hadn't contacted anyone during this period, and her family was now becoming rather concerned. Investigators decided to investigate Bethany's phone and credit card activities after she was reported missing. They discovered that she hadn't used any of her cards since January 29th, and that her phone wasn't working after 2:08 p.m., when she had called her employer to schedule further shifts. Furthermore, it was extremely concerning that she had failed to attend both her studies and her employment. The police also inspected Bethany's car and apartment, but they found no indication of any kind of suspicious activity. Additionally, there were no indications of forced entry. Nothing appeared unusual, and all of Bethany's possessions, including her passport, were in the flat. The investigators concluded they required the FBI and the public's assistance in March. They looked for bodies of water and isolated places. To get any information, they organized news conferences. Additionally, the FBI was attempting to understand Bethany's situation. Since Emil was the last person to see Bethany, the investigators naturally accused him of being responsible for her disappearance. After being flown back to Virginia, Emil was questioned by the police, but nothing connected him to Bethany's disappearance, despite the fact that he might have been a person of interest and had a motive because his wife had cheated on him. Emil had a perfect alibi, too. He voluntarily took a polygraph test and cooperated with the police throughout the inquiry because he sincerely feared for Bethany's safety. Emil even expressed his suspicions to the police with only empathy, but he was prepared to help in any way he could to ensure Bethany's safety. The investigators were left perplexed and effectively running into one dead end after another. The fact that Bethany's case was still being handled as a missing person case was extremely upsetting, since it gave some people the impression that the detectives weren't looking into it thoroughly enough. However, everything changed when they learned of a strange name. It turned out to be Ronald Roldan. When the police chose to question him as well, they immediately discovered that Ronald, not Emil, had been the last person to see Bethany. Ronald said that he was no longer living in Bethany's apartment and that he and Bethany had split up. He claimed that Bethany appeared to be normal and not at all agitated when he last saw her on January 29th. On the day that Bethany was last seen, Ronald left her apartment in the afternoon, went to an ATM, and took out cash at 4:26 p.m., according to authorities looking into his activities. He then lived with Danielle, his ex-girlfriend, with whom he had 2 kids. He even contacted Bethany twice to let her know where he was. At 4:01 and 4:30 p.m. Ronald's flat was the subject of a search warrant, but once more, nothing was wrong. There was no indication of a battle in his home, no proof on his electronics, nothing. However, the detectives looked farther. They also discovered, shockingly, that Ronald had a criminal history, but it was unrelated to Bethany's disappearance. As the days, months, and even years went by, Bethany's case was regrettably coming to a standstill with virtually no leads and no proof. The fact that Bethany's loved ones wanted to know where she was made it heartbreaking. When Bethany's family gathered on Mother's Day in 2012 to commemorate what would have been her 23rd birthday, they made a huge 3-layered cake in her favorite color, orange. In an attempt to raise awareness of Bethany's disappearance, her case was even featured on a number of news outlets, including Investigation Discovery and True Crime Daily, in November 2012. A new investigator was also given Bethany's case, and, despite her family's optimism, nothing emerged. However, an unrelated case that was being probed nearly 3 years after Bethany's mysterious disappearance in November 2014 completely upended the missing person case. A 911 call was made in North Carolina on November 12, 2014. Vicki Willoughby was the woman who called it in. She had admitted to defending herself by shooting her boyfriend. Vicki claims that she was accosted and severely beaten by her lover, who had sneaked up behind her. Vicki reached for her gun, hidden beneath the furniture, and shot her lover in an attempt to get away from him and to get him to stop. However, that didn't stop him from taking the revolver out of Vicki's grasp and shooting her 3 more times. Despite her terrible condition, Vicki was able to go out of the house and use a neighbor's phone to call 911. When the rescue services and police arrived, they discovered a horrifying and perplexing scene. You see, the person of interest in Bethany's disappearance was also Vicki's boyfriend. Ronald arrived. Vicki was taken to the hospital for her severe injuries while the cops took him into custody right away. Fortunately, Vicki persevered and fully healed, although she did lose an eye, which is terrible enough in and of itself. Surprisingly, Ronald's attempted murder charges were dropped after he accepted a plea bargain. I find it hard to believe that he was given a sentence of only 6 years in prison for nearly killing Vicki. However, it was agreed that Ronald would be turned over to the United States following his term. Customs and Immigration Enforcement for return to Bolivia. Vicki had a lot to say about Ronald after the violent incident. Vicki claimed that Ronald frequently threatened her by claiming, quote, "I've made people disappear." Following her suspicion and confrontation of Ronald regarding his potential involvement in Bethany's disappearance, Vicky's fear of Ronald's violent and dangerous behavior only grew. After Ronald's horrific attack, Vicky was even more determined to defeat him once and for all, before he could harm another lady and lead her to her untimely demise. Vicky shared her horrifying story in a number of public appearances on news networks and even on Dr. Phil. She even got to meet Kim, Bethany's mother, and they hit it off right away. Vicky was doing her best to provide Kim with any assistance she could in solving her daughter's unsolved case, and Kim was amazed by her unwavering courage and determination. Detectives investigated Ronald's life more after learning of this new development in Bethany's case, particularly following his affair with her, and discovered one extremely unsettling aspect. Ronald had dated a waitress named April prior to Vicky, and she had even filed a complaint against him for throwing her down the stairs, verbally abusing her, and acting violently against her. In fact, when Ronald left with money, $500 to be exact, the charges were dismissed. Ronald was extremely erratic, irate, and unwilling to talk to anyone when the investigators working on Bethany's case ultimately made the decision to question him. The police knew they had their man because of this. An arrest warrant for 42-year-old Ronald Roldan for the disappearance of 21-year-old Bethany Decker was ultimately issued in November 2020, about 9 years after Bethany's abduction. Examining social media activity around Bethany's disappearance allowed investigators to do this. Given that the same IP address was used to access both Bethany's and Ronald's Facebook accounts, it is quite possible that Ronald was the sender of the messages that Kim, Bethany's friends, and even Emil received. He allegedly did this to give the impression that Bethany was still alive, even though she wasn't. However, I don't understand why the investigators didn't check Bethany's social media accounts shortly after her disappearance. 9 years seems like a crazy long time, and they're fortunate that any proof remained at all after over 10 years had gone by. However, Ronald entered a not guilty plea while being charged with kidnapping and eventually with Bethany's second-degree murder. After 2 postponements, Ronald's trial was finally set for January 2023. However, Ronald ultimately entered a guilty plea to the allegation of second-degree murder in November 2022. He accepted a second plea agreement regarding the abduction charge. This man was obviously obsessed with 2 things: hurting women and accepting plea bargains. In any case, he was required to provide an account of what truly transpired on January 29, 2011, and Ronald claims that he and Bethany argued in the flat as part of his agreement. Ronald pulled a pregnant Bethany backward in a fit of wrath, causing her to stumble and smash her head on a windowsill, instantly killing her. Ronald claims that after checking for Bethany's pulse and being scared to dial 911, he placed her lifeless body in a Christmas tree disposal bag and disposed of it in their apartment complex's garbage compactor. Therefore, the case is closed if you accept this version of events, which I will state I do not. Ronald admitted it. In actuality, though, Ronald denied using Bethany's Facebook account to send messages to her loved ones. So, who was responsible for this? Official documents, however, say we don't know. However, I believe that you and I are aware of the true situation here. Despite the lack of a body and the circumstantial evidence, the prosecution were sure Ronald would face consequences for his horrible deeds. It is impossible that Bethany's death was an accident given his history of violence and abuse against women. However, Ronald received the maximum penalty of 40 years in prison for that charge on February 21, 2023. After just 12 years, or around 2035, he stands a possibility of being released. However, his plea agreement is revoked and he will be sentenced to serve the full 40 years if he commits another crime while incarcerated. For Bethany's family, Ronald's punishment was a painful experience. Bethany's family and friends hoped that she might still be alive and healthy for over a decade. However, they were horrified to learn that their daughter had sadly passed away just a few minutes after appearing in court. Even imagining what Bethany's family was going through while they sat in the courtroom with Bethany's killer is terrible and devastating. It was an unpleasant experience. Why is the only question that everyone has. What was Ronald's motivation? We can all agree that, considering Ronald's character and his treatment of women, it most likely wasn't an accident. However, why would someone kill a lady who was carrying his kid and do it so brutally? My best assumption is that he must have learned that Bethany was seeing Emil again, and it didn't fit into his idealized vision of being in charge of Bethany's every action. The saddest part of all of this is that Bethany's body has never been found. Her remains are unknown, and it serves as yet more painful reminder to Bethany's loved ones that they might never find out what truly happened to her or have the opportunity to bury her. Even though what Vicky endured was incredibly terrifying, she was the primary reason Ronald was eventually apprehended. Vicky was just another victim of Ronald. It's a nightmare, so I sincerely hope that Vicky and Bethany's family are recovering from this horrible experience. Even though what happened to Bethany is absolutely horrible, perhaps they can take some measure of comfort in the knowledge that this serial killer is now, at least temporarily, in prison. Since Bethany's body was never located, Emil was legally compelled to file for divorce from her. He also obtained full custody of their son, who had to grow up without his mother. The fact that the youngster lost his mother in such a terrible way is devastating, despite Emil being a fantastic father who gives his son all the love and care in the world. As a young lady, Bethany Decker had a lot to look forward to, but everything changed when she made a crucial and incorrect choice. This instance is extremely terrible and demonstrates the reality of abusive relationships. You must understand that there is always time to start over. There is a way out, so know that if you're having trouble. If you found this case compelling, make sure to subscribe to True Crime Stories Hub for more gripping real-life mysteries and chilling stories. We post new documentaries every week, so stay tuned for more shocking cases and deep dives into the world of true crime. Don't miss out. It's free to subscribe, and you'll always be up to date on the latest investigations. Thanks for watching.